Hello, I'm Mike Davis and welcome to today's Health and Beauty Show. Now, did you know that over a quarter of us in the UK are classed as clinically obese? Now, that's a huge number, 25% of us. In 2002, a staggering £500 million was spent by the NHS on obesity. So it's not just one of the biggest killers in the UK, it's also a very expensive one. Now, one potential solution for this is weight loss surgery. Now, you may have heard of this earlier this year because TV and radio personality and presenter Anne Diamond had a gastric band fitted before she went on Celebrity Fit Club. And Anne joins us today to talk about this and to talk about your personal journey. So thank you for coming in.
Hi.
Also with Anne, we've got Shaw Summers, who's a bariatric surgeon. You perform this kind of surgery, don't you,
Yep.
Shaw? And he's from the UK Hospital Group, which is the UK's biggest cosmetic and weight loss surgery group. Now, if you want to ask either of these a question, it's very simple. You just go to the bottom of your screen where you can see a button, you write your name, you write your question, and tell us where you're from, and we'll try and get as many of them answered in the next half hour as we possibly can. So let me ask you first of all, can I say you do look fantastic, so it's obviously worked for you.
Yes, it has.
It must have been a big decision to go for the surgery. What made you do it?
Well, I think anyone opting for surgery, you know, you always think you're tempting fate somehow, don't you? It is quite a frightening decision to make. On the other hand, you have to weigh it up against what you think is happening to you. And I was about 99 kilos, that's 15 stone 10. And I was, I think, on the brink.
How tall are you?
5'4", so
Right.
I'm quite short actually.
Yeah.
I was on the brink, I think, of facing all of the things. I could feel them beginning to happen almost. Diabetes, you know, the risk of a heart disease, even cancer. Obesity increases the risk of cancer, yeah. Stroke, all of those nasty things that go with being morbidly obese. It's a horrible term, but, you know, I was there.
Were you classed as morbidly obese?
Yes, I'm afraid so. Horrible, isn't it? And I don't know, I tried everything to lose weight. I really had spent a good 10 years trying everything, yo-yo dieting. Every time I lost weight, I put it all back on again,
Which is what
and
many people
more.
do.
It's
Yeah,
classic.
yeah.
The trouble is, you have to, at some point you have to think, am I going to go on doing this for the next 10 years? You know, waste my 50s doing it as well. And still with the prospect of getting to the age of 60, still, maybe even more obese, with all of those problems just about to happen to me. Or am I going to be proactive and do something now? And I want to be around for my kids to grow up and have my grandchildren. You know, I want to be around. I want to be healthy and fit and slim. I like it. It's much nicer than being morbidly obese. So I decided that after trying everything else, the only way I wanted to go forward was to research a bit of obesity. Surgery, obesity surgery. And
of course,
I found out about the gastric band.
Which is what you do, Shaw. You fit these gastric bands. Can you tell us, what is this surgery? For somebody who doesn't know what a gastric band is, what is it?
It's one of the types of operations that's available to help people gain control of their diet and their eating. And there's no real magic to it. It is simply a device that slows down the way you eat. Gastric banding is essentially a little rubber ring that goes around the stomach so that your stomach is turned into an hourglass shape and the food goes in the top end and collects there. Makes you feel full much more quickly, so you have to eat slowly, chew properly.
And do you eat less as well?
You do, because to try and eat a full plate full of food is going to take, you know, a
24
couple of hours.
Yeah, we've got a picture of it here. Can you tell us what we're looking at? This is obviously a stomach.
That is the stomach, and at the top of the picture you see the bottom of the gullet, and the little granules of food are going down the gullet, and they collect in a little pouch of stomach above a band. And the little white thing is the band.
That's the band.
And the band has a tail to it, the tubing, which is attached to a port, that little button on the top left there, or top right, sorry. That button is used then to adjust the band after the surgery so that you can tighten it up to help restrict the way the food goes through.
Okay, well, let's take some questions because we've got some emails coming through already. A lot of people want to talk to you both on this subject. This one is from Samantha, and she wants to know, she says, I'm looking into having a gastric bypass on the NHS. My GP has put me forward as I lost 13 stone, but she's put 7 stone back on. She says she finds it hard to keep it off. She's got an underactive thyroid and polycystic ovaries. She wants to know, do you think I'm doing the right thing? I'm now 20 stone, 9 pounds. I'd be grateful for your help. I think that's a question for you, Shaw, really, isn't it?
I think almost certainly weight loss surgery is potential help for Samantha. I think that anyone who's at the 20 stone mark, you'd have to be about 8 foot tall to make that in any way appropriate. So I think
and she's already been on a long journey by the sound of it
she's
too.
done the weight loss, she's in the middle of yo-yoing, and I think she needs to go and talk to a specialist who understands exactly what obesity surgery can do.
Okay, we've got another question from Wendy. She wants to know, how much was the stomach band operation, and would it be safe at the age of 65? She says, I'm desperate and I'll lose my husband if I don't lose weight soon. I'm 15 stone and 5'4". Thank you. She's the same height as you, Anne.
Never mind losing your husband.
Yes.
It's more important that you don't lose your health, I think. So do it for you. Don't do it for anyone else. It's a big step to make. And also don't be sort of pulled in by adverts that say it's much, much cheaper to go abroad. It may be in certain circumstances, but you have to take into account lots of other things. And this is why I'm telling my story at the moment, is because I made what I consider a mistake. I went to Belgium. I got a botched job, which is why it didn't work in the first place. And I had to be reoperated on by Shaw.
Could that have put you at risk, or it just didn't work?
Well, I think in certain circumstances, Shaw argues that, if lots of things had gone wrong, it could have put you at increased risk. Frankly, I felt at increased risk just being so far away from my surgeon. It's nice to be close to him. It really is, because it's a scary thing.
How much did it cost? Because when do you want to know how much it cost you?
The operation in Britain costs between £6,000 and £7,000. But with that, that's not just the operation, that's the aftercare as well, and you do need a lot of aftercare.
And very quickly, she said, am I too old at 65, Shaw?
Potentially not, but I would advise her to actually go and see a specialist who will give her the proper advice as to whether it really is for her or not.
Okay, next question then. This is from Helen. She says, what would you say to people considering this surgery? Is it a quick fix? Because I think a lot of people might be thinking, go on a diet, don't try this. I'm sure 100 people have said that to you today already.
I don't know how people, I think people who are calling it a quick fix, and of course the media do that, that's because they're not reading properly. People like me have spent 10, 15 years trying everything else first. No way is it a quick fix. But even when you get it done, it's not a quick fix. You have to learn how to live with it. You have to learn how to eat so that it optimises what it's going to do for you. Obviously, if you're eating so much less, you've got to make sure that what you're eating is good for you. If you're losing weight, you've got to do some exercise to make sure that you are going to lose weight in the right way. It is no quick fix. It ain't easy.
No, absolutely. Well, we had one question from Wendy, who was 65. We've gone the other end of the scale now. We've got a question from Josephina. She's 18 years old. She asks if she's too young for the surgery, Shaw.
Not necessarily. It does depend on how heavy she is and what she's done to try and lose weight through other means. It's certainly not the first option, but for some people it's the only way that we're going to get their weight down.
Yeah, we've got another question here, actually, from Nora, very similar. She says, my daughter's 17, wants to have the operation. Is this too young?
A lot of debate going on about surgery in teenage. I think 17 you should certainly start thinking about it if your weight is a significant problem. It will depend on the individual and the individual surgeon as to whether they're prepared to look after someone lifelong from that age.
Could she still be growing at 17?
Well, there are issues about that. If you're 17 and weigh 25 stone, then something's got to be done, whatever age. 15 and 25 stone, and I'm afraid the people are out there like that. So it does depend on the individual case, which is why you need to see a specialist and go and see someone who actually knows what they're doing.
Yeah, a lot of people obviously will want to know what the risks are, and we've got a question from Susan. She wants to know just that. What are the risks of having the operation?
The risks of having the operation directly are partly the risks of having an anaesthetic, things like blood clots, etc.
That's more risky if you're overweight?
If you're overweight, but again, if you go to someone who knows what they're up to, they will minimise those risks for the individual. And then there's the risks of the band op not going well. Overall, though, as a surgeon, I have to make the judgment: is having the op less risky than leaving the person to be overweight and having
to
the
suffer
consequence
from all the things that Anne was talking
about? Well, that's right. That's
earlier.
the personal dilemma you face as well. Not having this surgery. What's going to happen to me if I don't have it? What's going to happen to me if I do? It becomes a very personal decision.
The question from Betty wants to know what happens if the operation doesn't work? What other procedures are available? Because your first one didn't work, did it?
My first one didn't work, but that's because the band was put in the wrong place. It wasn't because of the failure of the band.
Right.
We didn't know it at the time until I had an X-ray at Shaw's. You'll know. I mean, does it ever not work?
It does, and that's where you need to see someone who's done a great deal of the surgery, who specialises it and is a recognised expert, who will actually look at each individual case where it hasn't worked and find out, is it the band, is it the person, is it a combination of the two?
It could be either, could it?
It could be either. Now, if the band doesn't work because the band is at fault, then there are other operations that can be done, things like a gastric bypass. There are other procedures which will work a little more effectively.
That's not as simple, presumably.
No,
as
it's
the
not as
gastric band.
simple, it's not as widely applicable, but it does work, and for some individuals it is the right way to go.
But you do have to treat the band as an aid. It isn't the absolute... It's not going to do
Not
all
the
the work
answer.
for you.
No.
I mean, I could eat Mars bars, crisps, and drink alcohol all night and probably not lose any weight. You've got to put your own effort in too.
So it's a joint effort
It's
between you and the
it's just
band, really,
exactly
isn't it?
that, yeah.
Okay, let's get another question. We've got one here from, we've just had one from Nora. Chloe says, "Hi Anne, do you still exercise since having the band fitted?"
Yeah, I do. It's, in a way, having the surgery, going to all of that extent to, go through the mental thing of having the surgery, makes you more committed, I think, to losing weight. As long as you don't do what we've just said, is sort of say, oh, I've got a band, it can do all the work now. I think, you're losing a lot of weight. Usually people who have the band are very obese. You're losing an awful lot of weight, so the only way to make sure that your body can actually take the readjustment is to do quite a bit of exercise. And I exercise more than I did when I was in Celebrity Fit Club. I do, actually. I exercise 2 or 3 times a week.
We're talking about readjustment. We've got a question here from Daniel. He says, it sounds like a drastic operation. I've heard that word applied to this operation quite a few times, I'm sure you have. Is the procedure painful to have and to recover from? And by the way, can you ask Anne and the doc how bad, quotation marks, the operation is in terms of pain and recovery?
The word drastic is an interesting use of the word because it's drastic to die from obesity too.
Absolutely.
Well, yes, all right, it's been called drastic. And I did feel very worried about it at the time. I don't know, it's just one of the, like we said, it's one of those decisions. How painful? Actually, not that painful at all. You have to have a good surgeon. But,
because it's keyhole, isn't it?
It's keyhole, yeah. So basically, they make 4 tiny little incisions around you in your stomach. And it's all done, I don't know how you guys do it, but they do it all sort of, like that with long handles. But when you wake up, you do feel sore, but I was, walking within a, same day, actually. And, it took 2 days to really recover. The only slightly painful bit is where they put this port thing, which is nearer the surface, so you just feel a bit more uncomfortable there. But within a week, you feel normal again.
In terms of the drastic argument, people have to be aware of what we're weighing up. We're weighing up the risks of a straightforward keyhole operation against the risks of staying obese and having the healthcare risks. And it's quite clear, it's not experimental surgery. We know the facts now that the risks of having the op are less than the risks of staying clinically obese for
Because
life.
I don't use the word drastic. I suppose staying clinically obese is equally drastic
It is, I'm
for
afraid
your health,
so,
isn't
yeah.
it?
And the fact is as well, isn't it, that most people don't stay obese at one level. It gets worse.
Tends to creep up.
Good question now from Roger. He says, "My wife is thinking of having the operation, but I don't think she needs to. She's a size 16. What advice can you give, Anne?"
Size 16? Well, I was a size 16 about 4 weeks ago. I don't know, what does that make your BMI? I wouldn't have thought that was probably overweight enough to warrant the operation.
Again, there is a grey area where how big is big enough, and I think it depends on the individual, depends whether they have any other problems, whether it's affecting their quality of life, and this is where, again, you need to see a reputable specialist who will help you come to the right decision rather than go and buy a cheap operation, because by and large they'll operate on anybody.
Well, that's not a good sign, is it?
No.
We've got a question from Sarah here, and it's for you. It says, "Do you think you cheated Celebrity Fit Club by having the band fitted?"
It's interesting because my story, and this is why I want to tell it. I'm doing a tour of gigs. I'm doing a tour. I'm telling people about my story, but basically because there is a moral in my story, in that I went to Belgium first of all because I wanted to remain anonymous. I wanted it all to be totally confidential, but it didn't work. We now know it was because it was put in the wrong place. I gave up on it completely. I thought maybe I just bought into some weird gadget that hadn't worked.
You must have been very disappointed.
I was devastated because it was a big decision to take surgery and then it didn't work. I tried everything to make it work. In the end, it didn't. I gave up on it. That's when Celebrity Fit Club came along and said, "Would you like to take part?" And I thought, well, maybe that's the only thing that's going to work for me. So I went into it. I didn't tell Fit Club that I'd had it done because A, they wouldn't have understood, and B, it was irrelevant by then. It wasn't working for me. So I didn't have an unfair advantage at all because the blinking thing wasn't working. The great thing was that after all the furore and everything, a lady called Donna Ross rang me up. She's from the hospital group. And she said, "We can't understand why it's not working for you. Come and see Shaw." I came to see Shaw. We had an x-ray done. And there it was in the wrong place. When the band is put in the right place, it works.
There's a question here from Hen. I think that's Henrietta. It just says, "Hen here. What was it that finally made you decide to have the operation?" I presume she means the first